Facebook and YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I have a super sensitive eyes, and like literally anytime I go outside, I have to have my sunglasses on or like my eyes burn. I don't know. I've seen videos where they say like don't wear sunglasses because it makes your eyes weaker or whatever. That was also the same guy who was like the electroculture guy who was saying to stare at.
Oh,
He was the guy who was saying to stare at the solar eclipse. Remember the eclipse? He was saying
oh,
like that.
oh, yeah. I remember this guy. Yeah.
He showed a video today. We're just getting right into it. He had a video today. Can you see me? Can everybody see me? Someone says, "Where is your face?" Like, hopefully it's still attached.
I can see it.
Yeah, I don't know. Give it a second, maybe. But no, I saw a video on that guy's channel today, and it was talking about how it was a something's going on. Can people see me? How about on Facebook? Can y'all see my face? We're having technical difficulties once again. No, there is no Destin's face. What is going on with
weird.
my life?
Let me look on mine and see if you're.
I'm looking on Facebook and there's no face.
What? Faceless Destin. That's not gonna work.
Just Vikram. Oh my god. Hold on a second. Let's see if that helped. That's so bizarre. Dude, it's always something, man. It's always something.
Yes.
Yes, I don't have a face. Well, I'm gonna keep talking. I don't care. It'll show up in a second. Okay. Give it a minute. Well, I guess the show is just there. We go. It's my face. I see it now, dude. I've got to get better internet. I don't think I can. I don't think I have the option to get like better internet over here in my area. There's no fiber.
So really, none at all.
I don't have fiber on this side on the other side of the highway. We don't have it here yet. And so I got the best internet. I got 1 gig up or download speed, so I should be fine. But for some reason, and I have 2 different routers too. Like, I don't know. My face is back. Okay, cool. Awesome.
Yep, I see it. I see your beautiful face.
Fantastic. Well, guys, thank y'all for joining us. It is Monday evening. I don't have a theme song for this yet. I need to make one.
Yeah, you need a theme song.
I definitely need a theme song, but this is the Texas Garden Guy show, and I started this a while back. I started the Texas Garden Guy show before we had the garden party, and I wanted to use the one-on-one kind of thing to get to know some of these garden influencers. I guess I hate that term. I don't know about you. I hate the term. It's kind of
gross, right? Like it feels gross.
Yeah, whenever someone calls me an influencer, like a garden influencer, it just makes me make my skin crawl. So I prefer the term garden content creator or plant or horticulture content creator. It sounds a little more artistic, a little more, I don't know. But anyway, so I started, the Texas Garden Guy show to kind of get to know people in the green industry and get to know more people in the, the social media landscape with the horticulture. And I met Vikram a long time ago. It's probably been over a year now that we've known each other.
Yeah.
You've been on the garden party a ton of times, and you got your own podcast that I've never been on. And then
listen, we're working on it. I haven't had anyone on in a while. I need to start recording that again.
No, I think at one point you had like 5 podcasts. I think
it's a lot. I don't know when I sleep. I should sleep more.
Dude, you can sleep when you're dead, man. If freaking sleeping is for the birds. I don't know. I honestly, I think I do worse on days where I get too much sleep. But I met Vikram probably over a year ago, and we've had you on the garden party a couple times, but I never really got you one-on-one and kind of like get your background and like how you got into all this stuff. And so real quick, let everybody know who you are and how you got started in, running to the Texas Tech, the greenhouses, and doing what you're doing now, and then becoming the plant prof.
Yeah. So I've been at it a minute. I'm Vikram Baliga. I'm a horticulture professor here at Texas Tech. I recently, weirdly, have a new position, and I am the assistant dean of outreach and engagement. And I'm not real sure anybody knows exactly what that means. We're still sorting through that a little bit. But yeah, so I'm a horticulture educator, science communicator. I've done that for a while. Grew up gardening with my grandparents. Like I've gardened most of my life. And when I sort of figured out that engineering was not going to be for me, in my after a year of college, I was like, um, well, I actually got good advice from an advisor who pretty much said, well, what do you like to do? Like, don't like the money and stuff is important, but like, what would make you happy doing for the rest of your life? And plants have always been a thing I enjoy, and so got into that. My undergrad's in landscape design. My master's was in olive production, and then my PhD was in urban water conservation, landscape design, those kinds of things. And so, yeah, I've been the plant prof for, oh man, I don't know, 2 or 3 years now, I
Yeah.
guess. I've run a podcast longer than that. So my podcast is called Planthropology, and I started that first back in 2019. So I've done it for, gosh, almost 5 years now. And then somewhere along the way, I was like, I need a like brand, and that kind of feels gross too, but a brand
Yeah.
that is not just the podcast and not just like me personally. So yeah, there you go. You get it. You get it. Um, and so here I am. Yeah, I do, science communication on multiple platforms and anywhere that people will listen to me talk or read my stuff. And it's fun. I enjoy it.
No, that's awesome, man. No, so you went to undergrad at A&M,
Mhm.
right? And then you got your master's from A&M too?
I got my master's at Texas Tech, actually. So I'm from Lubbock. I grew up here and I've spent most of my life here. But yeah, I went to A&M, and then I got my master's and my PhD here at Texas Tech.
Nice. Now that's awesome. Now, and I was going to ask you about this because I'd forgotten that you got your master's in olive production.
Mhm.
Um, and I was going to ask you something about olive oil the other day because there's a ton of videos going around, and there's just one guy in particular who he may be on the same level as like the electroculture guy, but he sounds less ridiculous. He talks about seed oils and stuff like, and how seed oils are not great for you, and he was talking about olive oil and how olive oil is good for you if it's not heated, but once it's heated, I forget what he called it. It's not, he was saying not to pay as much attention to the smoke point as the something point, as the I forget what it was called, but but it was saying it has a very low something point, that animal fats were better for you, like stuff like ghee, butter, and like and what is it, like uh, cow tallow, beef tallow.
Mhm.
It,
Um, so I think it's gonna depend. Like, I think a lot of this depends on who you listen to. Like, and I'm not a nutritionist by any stretch of the imagination,
right.
but some of the people I follow, uh, people that study this professionally. I had a woman on my podcast one time named Dr. Sarah Ballantyne earlier this year, and she wrote a book called Nutrivore. But she spent her whole career in like medical research. Like, she's a medical researcher, and she talks about seed oils a little bit and how ultimately there's not that much difference probably in the health effects between like plant oils, seed oils, animal fat products, and things like that. But it is true that like heating an oil past a certain point, and it's going to be different for every type of oil, can cause more like free radicals to form, and a lot of other weird kind of species of chemicals that can cause like problems in our body. And so, yeah, you have to be careful with anything that you cook with, that you don't heat it too much,
Right.
um, because then it can, yeah, cause like health problems and stuff like that. Olive oil is interesting. Uh,
I remember the term. It was peroxidization. It was the peroxidization. That's what it was.
right.
Do you know what that means? Do you have any idea what that means?
Yeah. So when we talk about free radicals, like that's a term that gets turned around like, oh, you don't want free radicals. Essentially, it's making like weird oxygen species. Like, oxygen is supposed to be O2, right? That's how it exists. But sometimes you get O3, sometimes you get O negative, sometimes you get these weird like combinations of oxygen molecules caused by heat and energy and different things. Sometimes chemical processes that will bind to things in your body where they're not supposed to. And then it causes like cellular problems, and it can cause some other issues. So peroxides are just weird oxygen species. Like, hydrogen peroxide is a specific type of peroxide. And that's the stuff you put on a cut and it bubbles, right? Like
Yeah.
and so like you can get peroxides through, again, these are carbon molecules with oxygen attached to them. And so you burn them past a certain point and you can create peroxides, and that can be a problem.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's certainly a concern.
Yeah. Well, and I've been like on my health kick a little bit, trying to get healthier, and I've been trying to pay, not just eating healthier, but like trying to pay more attention to what exactly I'm eating, and like I've been there's so many of these health influencers and stuff, and they say like everything is bad for you, and like dude, when you start looking at the back of some ingredients of certain foods, it will throw you for a loop, man. I was telling people last week that I use stevia. I use stevia in the raw for like all my to make like sweet tea. I use like stevia in the raw, and I usually have to use like 2 cups of stevia in the raw, like to make like a sweet tasting tea. And I was at work and I was making a cup of coffee, and I grabbed the packet and I was like, this is stevia in the raw. What are the ingredients in stevia in the raw? When it says stevia in the raw, you assume it's going to be raw stevia, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's the first ingredient in stevia in the raw? Dextrose.
Oh,
Dextrose. And I was like, what is dextrose? And I looked it up, and I was like, it's a 0-calorie sweetener made from corn.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why would they do that? And so I was freaking out a little bit. I was like, this is like there's some disingenuous labeled foods, but this is pretty ridiculous. And so I was like, well, how sweet is stevia? Like just stevia by itself. So I went online. You can buy 100% organic, 100% stevia, and literally 2 teaspoons of stevia was enough to sweeten my entire gallon of tea.
Oh, wow.
So when it says dextrose first and then stevia, I wonder how. I mean, it's got to be 90% dextrose.
Maybe so. I don't know enough about that to really talk about it, but that's interesting.
It was really interesting. It just kind of threw me for a loop, and like thinking about like what is all in the food and everything. And I wouldn't have to go off topic about that, but like I just thought it was so crazy, and like learning stuff about our food and everything. And even the people, I had someone comment the other day talking about fig wasps and worrying about fig wasp and all this crazy stuff. And I was like, if they only knew how many like insects were like in a slice of bread.
So many bugs,
dude. There's so much. There's more insects in a single slice of bread than there. Like, what is it like? Like, there's like a standard. Like, the certain parts per million can't contain so much. Like, they do tests for it. It's like that. Like,
oh yeah. So they test grains. They test even like chocolate, like all kinds of stuff. And there's like a certain allowable number of, cricket legs or whatever they can be. I don't know. But the fact is, like, if you've eaten a fruit from outside, at some point you've eaten a bug. Like it just happens. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
And it's for sure. It's fine. It's fine. There's people all over the world that eat insects as a regular part of their diet. It's a major protein source. And like, I think it feels weird to people in the West for sure, but in parts of the world, it's just like, yeah, here, eat this. It's like, I don't know.
Well, I think that was back in the day when I first started listening like to Joe Rogan podcasts. They were talking about, had some guest on, they were talking about some of the craziest stuff they would eat on Fear Factor. And, they had a limit on what they could make people eat on Fear Factor. It had to be something that someone in the world ate as a food. Huh. If someone in the like some culture in the world would actually eat that, then they could make it a food like on Fear Factor.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So like, if it's on Fear Factor or on like the challenge or whatever, somebody's eating it.
Somebody's eating it.
I got a question, since I want to talk more about olives and stuff. Is that like your expertise? Like you are like I know you're all around, but like that was what your master's degree, right?
It's been a minute, but yeah, like I know quite a bit, I think.
Yeah. No, I got some olive questions.
Okay.
Uh, Blue Sage, she's been a really good supporter of the channel. She says, "Can you grow olives in Texas?"
You sure can. In fact, the research I did was down in the Rio Grande Valley, south of San Antonio. One of the big orchards I worked in was in Carrizo Springs, which is sort of between San Antonio and the border, maybe hour and a half south of San Antonio. But they'll grow well. The past few years have not been great for olives because of
Right.
our big, heavy freezes all over the state. But generally, like there were orchards as far north as like Georgetown, north of Austin.
They used
Um,
to be pretty cold tolerant. They used to be to
well,
our old weather.
yeah, right, right. So, olives can take 28, 25. Most of the varieties that we're growing here, the above ground portion, much below about 25, you'll start losing like above ground tissue, like real bad stem dieback. Sometimes you'll lose the whole above ground portion of the plant. Much below about 15 to 20, you'll lose the whole plant, the roots and everything.
Really?
And so, down in the Rio Grande Valley, it's not getting that cold most years, but the past 2 or 3 years have been real. I mean, more than that, honestly, we've had a lot of big freezes farther south the past 10 years, even. And so, yeah, there's a couple of orchards that have been replanted multiple times. Which at some point, I'm kind of like if my whole orchard freezes out 2 or 3 times, I'm probably done. Like I'm probably
Yeah.
done. But yeah, now we're not even on a scale close to like California in different places in terms of olive production. But last I saw, there's maybe like 4,000 acres of olives in the ground in Texas right now,
Wow.
mostly down in the valley.
Well, and then they prefer like a Mediterranean climate, right?
Mhm.
Kind of like how figs prefer like they'll survive freezes, but they'll come back. Are and this is something I don't know because I don't know much about olives. Or do they graft them, or are they mostly just propagated from cuttings?
Some of both.
Yeah.
A lot of them are on their own roots. They typically have pretty robust root systems across varieties, but they do graft some for sure. And a lot of that's to take advantage of you know salt tolerant or whatever, like whatever kind of resistance we're trying to get out of that. Now, old growth olive orchards like in the Mediterranean, all of those are on their own roots. Even some of the newer ones that are in an older style, they're not generally grafted. In the US, we do a little bit more grafting, um, but it's not like a lot of other fruit trees that pretty much every apple you buy is grafted. Like every, peach tree that you buy from the garden center is going to be grafted. Like, um, olives are often grown on their own. In fact, for some of the research that we did, we just got cuttings in and rooted our own cuttings and went from there.
Wow. And what are some of the I know I've heard of like the Ambikino and a couple of other these varieties. Like what are the most popular varieties here in Texas? Like
So,
maybe people should look into if they want to get into them.
so
Like
we're
what are
going to
the good
be
varieties?
we're going to be growing a lot of Spanish olives in Texas. Our climates are very similar to some of the Spanish growing conditions. So, Mission is a big one. There's one called Koroneki, which was actually that one's a Greek olive. That was the least cold tolerant, I believe, in our trials, and actually, I think the least drought tolerant. But probably the two most common ones grown in Texas are Arbequina and Arbesana, and then there's some like Picual and a couple of others. Um, but mostly we're going to be looking at Spanish olives. They fit our climates here in Texas a little better.
Okay, that makes sense. Now and are most like olives grown like in the U.S. like for olive oil? Is that the most common thing?
Yeah, at least in Texas. Now in California, they are doing like black table olives, green table olives, and things like that. I'm not too familiar with those. Like my research was mostly in oil production, and so at least in Texas, I think maybe with a couple of examples, and it's been a while since I've really done a lot of digging into this. I think we're primarily growing for olive oil here.
And there's probably different varieties that are grown for pickling. Like, cause I mean,
Mhm.
is that accurate? The stuff the olives that like in the fridge, whatever. Those are pickled,
Mhm.
most of them.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
brined or pickled usually. And so, yeah, those are different varieties for sure. They're going to be larger. Generally, they're going to have a lower oil content because the oil's bitter, right? Until it's pasteurized and extracted and things like that. Like of course, we're going to eat a few off the tree just to see, like yeah, you have to, right? They're real bitter just right off the tree.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, the varieties that are grown for table olives, for pickling, for brining, whatever, are specific varieties usually.
that's really cool. And so you did that for 2 years after your undergrad,
Hmm.
and then how did you get into being a professor at Texas Tech? How'd that start?
So kind of a long road in some ways. So I graduated with my master's in 2012. Um and it was kind of like, we were coming out of the 2008 recession or whatever. It wasn't a huge one, but it was big enough. And the job market was kind of not great. And so I ran a landscape company for about 2.5 years, from 2012 to 14,
Oh wow.
because that's what my undergrad's in. Like I have a background in that. So here in Lubbock, I ran a landscape company, did a lot of like xeriscape, drought tolerant landscape kind of stuff. I like to tell people I moved rocks for a living for 2 years, which is
Yeah.
basically true. Like, I was in good shape. I missed that a little bit. Uh, and and then in 2013, 14, there was a job that opened up with um, the Extension Service, and
That's right.
I was doing this in like coming off of the big drought in 2011. My last summer landscaping here, it was, I think, over 105 every day for like a month and a half, and we're out like moving rocks, and it was terrible. It was terrible.
You're looking for anything to get out of the heat.
Anything. And I was like, I mean, I literally took a pay cut to go take a job that I could do inside. You know what I mean?
Right.
But quite honestly, like, I wanted to get back into education. I Graduating with my undergrad, I always saw myself being in the landscape industry for my whole career. But then again, graduating from my undergrad in um, 2010, like, the market was bad then too. So I was like, it's not a bad time to be in school. And so
Right.
I did my master's, and I loved teaching labs. I loved like being a part of all that. And so I was kind of looking to get back into education anyway. And so I spent 4 years as an extension agent here in Lubbock. And then 2018, well, let me back up. I started working on my PhD in, no, go ahead.
No, I want to ask about the extension agents because I think it's so interesting because I've met so many extension agents now,
Hmm.
through Kimberly Mayer and Skip Richter, everybody the world famous garden line Skip Richter was an extension agent for a long
Yeah.
time. Um, and so I mean I'd like to know from what I've learned about extension agents is that some counties have like a horticulture agent, and then
Hmm.
some counties also have like a ag agent, like a general agriculture agent. But then some smaller counties just have one agent for both.
That does
So
everything. Yeah.
yeah, so what was how was it in Lubbock?
So,
They probably had two, right?
oh, we actually had like 6 agents in our
Oh
office. Like,
wow.
we're a bigger office here. So we had
There's so
one that
much ag up there. It's insane. All the cotton and everything. It's insane.
Yeah, so we actually had two ag agents. One of them did more, um, yeah, row crops, cotton, sorghum, corn, all that kind of stuff. And then we had another ag agent that did like livestock and stock shows and animal ag and stuff like that. So he worked with like the 4-H kids quite a bit more. And then we had a 4-H agent who all she did was 4-H stuff. We had a family and consumer sciences, which is now, I think, like kind of health and human services kind of stuff,
Okay.
agent, and then an assistant. And then we had an integrated pest management agent for a while. So we had a big office here.
Wow.
And like Houston has a huge office, Austin has a huge office. Some of the bigger counties are going to have multiple, but you got to think about most of the counties in Texas have like 2,000 people in them. Like, they're not highly
Right.
populated.
Right.
And so they'll have one or two usually. Usually they'll have a 4-H agent and an ag agent, and between the two of them, they kind of cover everything.
Yeah. Well, 'cause I think Kimberly is like the only one in Brazoria County. She might have another. It might be her and someone else. But
Hmm.
Brazoria County is huge. Brazoria County is so big.
Hmm.
Um, and it's crazy. I was laughing on the inside whenever you said the 4-H, and I was like, I can only imagine the 4-H has got to be huge up there in Lubbock. I bet it's insane.
It is. There's a lot of it up here. Lots of Um, lots of showing. Like I didn't have a lot of stock show responsibility. I didn't do much with that. We worked at the fair here a little bit, but not a ton. But yeah, it's a big deal up here in West Texas for sure.
Yeah. When and I for some reason I never think of like Lubbock as West Texas, but it is. It is. But being here in Houston, I think of like Lubbock. Y'all are more west than you are north, because like I think of like Amarillo and Abilene more north. You know what I mean? So I guess y'all are West Texas.
Yeah, so we are technically probably in the Panhandle, right? We're like in the Southern Panhandle, and I
Yeah.
tend to think of it. We call it West Texas, I think, because our climate's more like El
Yeah.
Paso than it is Houston, you know.
Yeah.
And so we kind of lump ourselves in, but we're kind of like northwest central in the Southern Panhandle. We're kind of in a weird spot up here.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, man. And so what was your what were you doing? Like what was your like
So I had my two big programs a year, and so kind of how it works is most of the agents that and it will vary some from county to county, right? But a lot of the agents that you work with will have a couple of big program areas per year. So we kind of pick two, we plan out our programs per year. So mine was always water. I did water conservation every year.
that's big up
Um,
there?
Man, seriously. So urban water conservation in the landscape, those kinds of things. And then usually my second one, some years I did tree care, 2 or 3 years or 2 years. And then the rest of the time I did small farms and local food. So I worked with like local growers and small farmers and market gardeners and things like that.
That's awesome.
And
No,
so
it
those
seems
were
more.
kind of where I spent my time.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you like if you go into like being an agent, if you like grew up like on a farm, you're probably going to handle the more farmy stuff, and like you didn't grow up like on a farm
No.
or like showing cattle or anything like that. So you're more handling like urban guard, like
Mhm.
stuff like that. That makes more sense. And I guess it doesn't always work out that way though. I mean,
No, and a lot of times so there's not a horticulture agent in every county for sure. Like there's I think, of our 254 counties in Texas, I think all but one had a county extension office, and I think all but a few had an ag agent, like pretty much everywhere in the state.
wow,
Um, but there were maybe I'm trying to think back to some of our like horticulture agent events. There were maybe like 30, 35 of us across the state.
that's not
Um,
that many.
it's not that many, and so that we
No,
were mostly in like more urban counties, um,
okay,
and so like
which
there
makes
were
sense.
yeah,
Yeah,
there were a lot in the Dallas Metroplex. There were a lot in the Houston area, Central Texas, but then like it was pretty much me, a guy in Midland, a part-time person in Amarillo, and then the next closest, I think, horticulture agent was all the way in El Paso.
oh
And so like
wow.
there were not very many of us up in this part of the state.
Yeah. Well, it's like, hey, go up there and make sure the tumbleweeds are still there.
Yeah,
It's like,
like no one's blown away too much.
no, it's really important, because especially like speaking of like uh urban growing, I want to point out my friends at Smart Pots. They have this display up in at Harvard right now, and I encourage y'all to look it up. It's called the pollinator tower. It's made out
Hmm.
of like scaffolding, and they have like several hundred smart pots, like the fabric pots that are like hung, and it's like 30 something feet tall. And it's called like a pollinator tower. And they made it like specifically to bring pollinators into like the urban environment, because that's such an issue nowadays, with pollinators going to the city, like, butterflies just getting destroyed and bees just getting, hit by cars and stuff like that. So like it's cool to like have like little checkpoints and stuff like that.
Cool.
Pollinature. I've never heard that before. That's a good term. I like it. So
Yeah, that's cool.
check that pollinator tower out. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, and going back to the ag agents, extension agency, I always tell people, when they ask me, hey, what should I be planting right now? What variety does really well right now? And I tell them like, hey, if you're in a county in Texas, or a lot of states have extension agencies. If you're in a
Mhm.
county in Texas, though, for sure, look up your zip code, find out what county you're in, look up your agency, your extension agency, and they'll have a schedule from the AgriLife that tells you like when to start these seeds. If you're going to do them from transplants, if you're going to direct seed them, it tells you what varieties do really well in your area. And like our tax dollars are going to like fund stuff like this.
Yeah.
And so you need to be taking advantage of these extension agents. And most of y'all are really cool. Like they're all like,
We try to be.
yeah, I mean, well, I mean, like I'm sure like sometimes it's just cool to hear from someone that isn't like a cotton farmer or like a corn, you know what I mean? Like it's cool to hear something different, you know, like
Yeah.
I'm sure, you know, so most of y'all are very willing to help out. I say y'all, you're not an agent anymore, but like Kimberly is like super cool, really, really nice person, and super helpful, especially with the master gardeners and stuff like that. So definitely, if you're out there listening right now, use the extension agency to your advantage.
Oh, for sure. And yeah, master gardener associations too. Like I was part of my job as a horticulture agent, and I think all but one or two of us have some of these had some of these responsibilities. I don't know what it's like anymore. It's been a lot of years at this point, but like uh a lot of us had master gardener responsibilities. So I oversaw the Lubbock Master Gardener Association. I was the advisor for them and the county advisor and all that. So I was sort of their link and whatever back to AgriLife. And they're like, so many of them do such cool stuff in their communities, from demonstration gardens to like plant sales to public education and like everything in between. So yeah, look up your county office, look up Master Gardener Associations, and you can get a ton of great information.
Oh yeah. Well, and I highly, even if like you're not someone like, it's hard for me to do the master gardener class because it's like a certain time of year,
Yeah.
and it's hard to make that. Go to a meeting. Go to a
Yeah.
meeting and meet people. If you're in an area where, because I hear that from a lot of people. I wish I had friends that like I could get together with and garden and stuff like that. And sometimes you can find garden clubs, but like the Master Gardener Club is like, that is where you can go and nerd out with plant friends, and you get free plants and you can trade plants and all kinds of cool stuff. Like, and their sales are awesome. Their
Yeah.
plant sales are great. I got a lot of stuff from my Master Gardener sale this year, and it did amazing. So
Yeah, they
can't
tend to have good
recommend that
stuff.
enough. Yeah, and it's usually like good. It does well in your area too. So like, so yep. But well, okay. Well, tell me how you went from extension agent to Texas Tech professor.
So as part of my job as
Good.
was there a question or something like
I was saying I was going to ask go from being a master to a doctor.
right,
Like
right.
because that happened at this time too, right?
Yeah, so as part of my job as an extension agent, I worked with one of the a lot of the professors at Tech. Like they would come speak at our programs. We'd work together on stuff, and I worked with our turf grass professor here at Tech to do like we would do turf grass like field days, and where people would come and learn about more water conservation. They would learn about new varieties that are better in our climate and better management, those kinds of things, right? So like, how do you like if you're going to have a lawn, how do you do it more environmentally friendly? We did a lot of that. And so in 2015, he had a spot open up in his PhD program and was like, I don't have funding. Essentially, it was like, I don't have funding to pay for a full-time student, but I'd like to work with a PhD student. I was like, great. I don't want to quit my job. So I started working part-time on my PhD with Dr. Young, and took me a minute. That was a long process, but around 2018, there was a position that I had interviewed for here at Tech, and I was still a little ways from finishing my PhD. And I didn't end up getting that job, but in the process, like another job opened up that they called me and they're like, hey, we think you'd be a good fit for this. So I kind of stepped in 2018 as the manager of the greenhouse and gardens on campus, the teaching greenhouse and horticultural gardens. Was teaching some labs, doing that kind of thing. And then when I finished my PhD in 2020, I started taking on more teaching responsibilities and sort of moved up through the kind of academic ranks a little bit. And so now I'm teaching faculty. I'm an assistant professor of practice, which a lot of time professors of practice will like be in industry part-time. They'll have like a career or whatever, or we're teaching faculty, right? Like we don't do a lot of research.
Okay.
which I'm okay with. And then just recently we started looking at like, okay, I'm already doing all this like outreach, science communication stuff. And like I pretty much told him when I stopped because it was a big part of my job at Extension. So when I moved to tech, I was like, I'm not going to stop doing this. So like y'all are just going to kind of have to deal with it. And they were okay with it. Um, and then started the podcast and all this stuff, and eventually just kind of worked out that they were like, well, we need more help on the like outreach and engagement side. So actually just a couple of weeks ago, I started as this assistant dean position. And so I'm helping figure out how we do better outreach, how we communicate with the public better, and sort of do some of the stuff that Extension does, but in our own house, so to speak.
That's really cool. I know. Going back a minute, just you got your doctorate part time, so it took you
Yeah.
It took you 4 years to get it.
It took me nearly 6. So
Holy crap!
yeah. So I started in January of 2015, and I finished in December of 2020. And so
it took you as long to get your doctorate as it took you to get your master, associate, or bachelor's in.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And completely honestly, like I could have done it in 4, but like writing my dissertation and getting all that stuff done, it was just so busy with like work, and my son was born in 2016, so I had a kid, and like just with everything, I was definitely on the slow track.
What does it take to get like your doctorate? Like what does that mean? Like,
so essentially you do research, right? You come up with a research project, and like to get a master's, you're doing research too, but it's more like closely directed by the professor that you're working with. So like
okay,
if I had a master's student, or with my master's students, we're pretty much telling them like, here's what you need to do, right? They do the work, but we're really very, very closely guiding their research.
okay,
At the PhD level, there's still some of that. We're still training. We're still, making sure they know how to do it. But what we're really trying to see is, can they run their own research program? Can they come up with their own stuff? So PhD students tend to be a little more, I don't want to say on their own, because that's not always the case. Sometimes it is.
like more independent.
Yeah, more independent. Like you're coming up with what the research you want to do is. You're like trying to write papers and grants. And my advisor and I worked pretty closely together because I was just part-time. And so we had probably more of a like collaborative relationship than some PhD students have with their advisors. But yeah, so we do research projects. Usually your dissertation, depending on the field, will have 2 or 3 different experiments that it represents. And you write papers and you write this big dissertation, and then your committee of people who are already PhDs will sort of decide if it's good enough or not. Like if you've done the work to like earn you that rank of PhD. And it is a grueling process.
Yeah.
Like my dissertation was over 200 pages long.
What was the topic? Like, what was it called?
So it was evaluate. I should know this off the top of my head. Why I stick on this is we had like 2 or 3 titles that we were kicking around. Essentially, we were looking at what motivates people to change their like landscape management practice.
Okay.
But we also looked at some different products in turfgrass to like see what makes them more water smart. Like if you're watering your Bermuda grass or whatever, what can you add to it to make sure that it's more drought tolerant, that it performs better with less water, those kinds of things. So we did a couple of different things. But yeah, we were looking at like, if you charge people more, what did they do? If you fine people, if you communicate better, if you do X, Y, and Z, what is the effect on their water use? What do you have to do as like a city or a water authority or an educator to get people to use water a little bit more wisely? That was kind of the
cool
approach to it.
Wow, that's interesting. And this whole time you're working in the greenhouse, you're running the greenhouse.
For about half the time, yeah. So 2015 to 18, I was still an extension agent doing all that stuff. And then 18 to 20, when I was really doing all my writing, I was running the greenhouse. Yeah.
And what does that entail? Because like, I mean, to me, that sounds like the dream job.
It's pretty cool.
My friend Danita Brandon runs the rainforest, at Moody Gardens, the pyramid in
That's
Galveston.
super cool.
And I was like, that is like the coolest job ever. So when you told me like, oh yeah, I run the greenhouse tech staff, like that's awesome. That must be like very similar. Like what was it like? What were your daily like things you would do?
So it is a cool job. Like it's objectively such a cool job. And in a lot of ways it was like sort of a dream job, but I wanted to teach more, you know. But we've got 20,000 square feet of greenhouse space, almost. It's big. We have 4 classrooms. We have 3.5 acres of horticultural garden around it. So generally, we were just trying to make sure that everything kept running in the greenhouses, that we maintained everything well. We planted the garden. We designed our displays. We came up with new stuff, facilitated labs and classes. So half of the space is essentially like teaching space and like public plant collection kind of space. And then half of it is research. And so we would work with grad students and researchers and things to make sure they had what they needed to do their research and that the facilities worked for them and all that kind of stuff. And then in the garden, it was garden maintenance. Essentially everything that goes into running a public show garden is kind of what I did for about almost 6 years.
And that's where your landscape management kind of came in handy.
It was cool. Like I tell people a lot that my whole life, I've always just sort of made the next choice. Like whatever, like when things presented themselves and I was like, oh, this could be cool. Like this is a good opportunity. I took it a lot. And, at the time, sometimes it didn't really make a lot of sense. But now looking back, I can see, oh man, like studying landscape design and then studying olive trees and then landscaping professionally for a while and being an extension agent. Like it sort of has lined up super well to let me do what I do today.
Oh, that's so neat, man. I was going to ask you, because I know this happens some places like at Moody Gardens. My friend Danita, they have the pyramid, but then they have like the really cool spaces, all the greenhouses where they're propagating and growing. And they had a ton of these staghorn ferns. They were the size of of a punching bags. Like they were huge. And I was like, where did these come from? And she goes, people buy them and own them forever. And then when they die, they donate them to like the greenhouses. And like literally I was at another nursery and I was talking to the owner and he had a giant staghorn. And I was like, hey, do one of your customers die? And he goes, how'd you know? I was like,
that's funny.
He told me, he was like, yeah, they bought that fern like 50 years ago from this nursery where my grandpa ran it. And when they died, they brought it back. And so do people bring stuff to y'all like and donate to like the facility, like cool stuff?
Sometimes, usually, sometimes whether we want them to or not, people will donate stuff. It's funny you talk about the staghorn ferns because we have a couple. We have one little one that's maybe this big, and then we have one that's maybe the size of a beach ball.
Yeah.
But a couple of our technicians are actually going out to Dallas for a meeting, and there's a guy out there that's donating one to the university, and one of them I want to say he was saying is like 6 feet tall.
They get huge.
It's huge. And it's probably 40 years old. And he just he said he was getting too old to take it in or out, to in and out of the garage or out of the house or whatever. It's just getting to be a pain. So he's donating it to us. So we're going to have to figure out what to do with this thing.
If y'all have a beam or something in the greenhouse that you can hang it from, like, if you go watch the videos like in Florida, I don't think they're invasive, but I know they grow kind of crazy in Florida. People just dump them in the swamps. But they'll have giant ones like bigger than humans, like hanging from trees. And what they'll do in some of these like gardens is when they, instead of fertilizing them or anything like that, which I don't think there's really a way to fertilize them, they'll walk through like the area and eat a banana and they toss the peel up and get it stuck up in there so that it breaks down and it feeds the staghorn.
It's kind of cool.
And I was like, that's kind of a cool. I don't know that it needs that, and I'm sure it stinks, but like it's like, hey, just so y'all know, don't use banana water. It's gross.
It's gross. It's not. It doesn't do the thing. Don't let TikTok lie to you.
Well,
Uh,
and we can kind of roll into that, you know. So like around this time, you kind of started your TikTok and everything too, right? Well, I
mhm,
guess yeah. So maybe around 2020 or so.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah,
And so, like, I'd run a Facebook page for, like, my extension stuff for a while and an Instagram, and then when I started at Tech, I had one for the greenhouse and gardens. So we still do. It's Texas Tech Greenhouse if you ever wanna check it out. I have not posted there in a hot minute, and I need to. I kind of forget about it because I do more of my, like, plant prof
you
stuff
got
now.
so much going on, you
Too
forget
much.
about it. Yeah.
And, then, yeah, and so in 2020, I think like a lot of us, I was bored and, like, so an interesting thing, like, 2020, we left for spring break and didn't come back,
Yeah.
right? Like, that was March of 2020, so students went home, and at first it was like, "Oh, we're gonna do an extra week of spring break, and this whole thing will blow over," and clearly it didn't. Um, and so, like, students didn't come back really till August, and so I wasn't allowed to have a staff.
So is you in the greenhouse by yourself?
So
That's my dream. That's like that sounds amazing.
it was cool for a little while,
Yeah.
but, like, at this point, like, I'm there, it's March through I had some student assistants we got permission to bring back in, like, June,
Yeah.
but really for, like, 3 months, it was, like, just me, and I'm trying to write a dissertation, and I'm, like, there by myself, and literally the first day I was going to, like, water and stuff, I got stopped by an officer on campus, and they were like, "Hey, do you have permission to be here? Can you like, are you why are you here?" And I actually had a signed letter from, like, the president of the university saying, like, "You have permission to be on campus," and all of this stuff. And so I would just go and water greenhouses and, like, listen to podcasts and,
Yeah.
whatever, because it would take me 2 or 3 hours a day just to water everything, and then I'd try to work on my paper and all kinds of stuff. And so, uh as part of that, I started being like, well, people are bored and at home and they don't have anything to do. And maybe I can show a little bit of what I'm doing. So I started making videos about, well, what's going on at the greenhouse with just me and the plant I put googly eyes on or whatever. And it just sort of went from there and built from there. And I don't know, it's become something fun and pretty cool, I think.
No, I love your channel because I think anybody it's weird how the algorithm works. Like if you start if like literally if I like one raccoon video, like I get a million raccoons like in my feed. And it's the same thing with gardening. Like if you like a gardening video, you see videos and then without a doubt eventually you see those 5-minute craft videos,
Hmm.
5-minute green videos, and they pop up and it's the most ridiculous stuff. And everybody who sits there and watches it, and I think it's by design, obviously, for people to click and comment like, how crazy this is. I saw it this past week. I was in my dad's house and we did that ant killer video where he put out the Foca laundry detergent mixed with uh, uh, Spectracide or whatever, and I'm watching him mix it up, and then we walk outside and he uses his hands
Oh
to
no.
spread it out. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, Dad, what are you doing? He goes, oh, I work in the chemical plants. He goes, this ain't going to do nothing to me. And I'm like, okay. But like, I posted the video and I didn't even think about it. And every other comment was like, why is this idiot using his hands? And my dad loved it. My dad loved it. He's like, he was just sitting there laughing and watching the comments. But then I started watching the views go crazy. And
Hmm.
it hit 1.1 million views
Wow.
on Facebook. On Facebook.
Wow.
Now, at least 100,000 of them were my dad because nobody, dude. I'm telling you, my grandpa and my dad love being on camera so much. Anytime I get them, they turn into Billy Mays, like from OxyClean, so quick. It is so funny watching them, but like, it is funny that I know some people intentionally put crazy stuff in the background of their videos or do something wacky just to trigger the algorithm when people comment stuff.
Hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
where you come in. That's where you come in, with
Yes.
the duets.
Yeah, so I stitch and duet a lot of 5-minute craft stuff, just talking about how ridiculous it is. And I mean, it's so ridiculous, y'all, like all the stuff. But and it's what's crazy is I sort of drew a line in my head because there's a lot of other I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. There's a lot of other creators out there that are actually making that same kind of content. but it's like a guy. You know what I mean? Like it's like
Yeah.
one person.
Not
And
a crew or a team.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not this big conglomerate of like this big Russian company that's like putting all it's and if you really start digging into 5 minute craft, some of there's it's crazy. Like what you'll
Oh
find is
yeah.
nuts.
It's
Uh
it's it's probably it's got to be linked to like Russian disinformation, all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah, I bet there's got to be something to it, man.
it's this
It's
big
got,
like multi-billion-dollar company or something. It's crazy.
they use CGI now, like in some.
Oh yeah.
It's crazy. It's
Mhm.
like Jurassic Park level stuff.
They have products at Walmart now. Like they
Shut
have
up.
no, they have branded 5 minute crafts like craft projects you can buy at Walmart now. And so it's this big corporation. And so like I am happy to go after
Crashing.
them every day of the week, right? Like I'm happy to do that. But even some of the bigger creators, like there's this one guy, and I don't want to necessarily like call out his name. Uh,
Say it.
uh,
Say it.
so if you've seen him, you'll know he's got kind of like long curly black hair. He wears a white t-shirt. He moves around a lot in his videos. He yells.
Oh yeah, I
You know
hate
what
that
I'm talking
guy.
about? Yeah.
Yeah. If you take coffee and put it in this glass
Yup.
and
You got
then
him.
add some strawberry syrup, you've got aloe vera or so. Like it's the
It's that
craziest
stuff.
stuff, and it's
And,
just
oh, it's a lot. It's a lot for me. And so like
makes you nauseous.
I've made a few videos like on his content too because he's got a book out that he's hawking and all that kind of stuff. And his stuff is a lot of times more plausible,
Yeah.
like, but it's still like he's the one that does a lot of banana water. Like if you take a banana peel and drop it in the water for 20 minutes and put cinnamon in it, like you can save all your plants. I'm like, you're just gonna grow fruit flies. Like that's how you get
Yeah.
gnats. It's a gnat farm.
Yeah.
Uh and so but like in my head there's a line somewhere of like people I won't go after and like people I will because I don't want to be a jerk, right? It's supposed to kind
Yeah.
of all be in good fun. Um but the crazy thing is like people believe this stuff.
Yeah.
Like you have a lot of comments like you were talking about in the 5 minute craft videos that are like these people are out of their minds, like it's crazy. And then you have a lot of them that are like, oh, I can't wait to try this, so this is such a good idea. And I'm watching this video like they're just going to kill their plants, they're going to fill their house with gnats, and it's going to totally turn them off from gardening.
Exactly.
And that's bad. Like and some of them like there's stuff that could potentially be harmful, like actually harmful to people. And so I feel like fighting misinformation in the like small things, because if you can swallow the small things, it makes it easier to swallow the big things. You know what I mean? And so like I think it's a good idea to push back on that where we can.
No, for sure. And there's ways to go about. I mean, there's ways to go about certain not I won't say retaliation. There's ways to go about certain criticisms,
Hmm.
of certain things. I like just for the Epic Gardening posted a fig video, and he's in California where they do have fig wasps. They do
Hmm.
have fig wasps in California, so you know he might only know those types of figs.
Hmm.
And so he had commented. He made a video about fig wasps and things like that, and in the figs. And I was worried because I sell a lot of fig trees and I promote a lot of fig growth. And so I commented. I was like, "Hey, just FYI, if I was like most of the figs you grow will not have fig wasps.
Hmm.
Most places you live don't have fig wasps to grow inside your figs. They're a
Hmm.
very localized species of wasp for specific figs.
Hmm.
Um, and I did it in a respectful way. And that was weird because I got so many follows just from that comment.
Hmm.
Like I think that video, that comment got like 10,000 likes.
Oh
Like
wow.
it was crazy. It was crazy. And then me and him, that's how we got kind of introduced to each other and stuff like that. And so there's ways to go about things. But I like the way you do it because I don't think you're being ugly with the things you're saying. You're just having a little criticism, except when people eat their burritos wrong,
Y-
obviously.
Freaking Josh Peck. I swear.
But certain things are just so preposterous, like the toothpaste, and
Oh my
like
gosh. Yeah.
it's insane. Like putting toothpaste on a tomato is not going to grow a pineapple plant like they show in the video. It's the craziest stuff you see, and the layperson that doesn't know anything about gardening will take it seriously. Like, oh yeah, let's go get a thing. Let's go get a tube of Crest
Hmm.
and make this. It's just like
And and it's just gonna cause problems, and, like, I know it's, like, rage farming, right? They just want the clicks, and that's fine, whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, but that also, I think, again, I think it's important to push back against that stuff where we can, and I think it's important to make sure that people are getting good information, because there's a lot of bad information, weirdly, like, very much in the garden space out there, and I think it's, like, for what we do, you and I do, like, I think it's important to show people, like, you don't need to be scared of it. It's not that, like, complicated usually. You just show up and you put some stuff in the ground and you try it and you'll kill some plants and that's fine, and then you try again, and so, like, what you do too, I think is great because you show your progress and you show what you're doing in the garden, and, I think people really relate to that because 'cause they're like, "Well, this guy's doing it, I can probably do it too," you know? And I think that that's important as well.
Yeah, and I struggled with that in the beginning. It's so disheartening in the beginning when you make your first couple of videos and like, well, why isn't this video going viral? Why isn't this, why isn't this doing that? It gets frustrating, and then you start trying out the jump cuts and all the kind of weird stuff like, oh, this worked for them, it worked for me.
Yeah.
And you got to find your own path and your own style that people like, and if you just keep doing it the way you do it, it all works out in the end. And that's kind of how your following has grown and how my following has grown. And it's been great. And that the green community is so nice. I mean, we
That's
finally
so
met
cool.
we finally met at the expo, and
Yeah.
like there was not one like mean person that I met all weekend. Like
It was so
I,
cool.
I've been telling people, I'm usually, 'cause I don't have kids, so I'm usually the person at the table when everybody's showing their kids, like on their phone, like, oh, here's my garden and all this stuff. I was like, imagine that, but everybody at the table is showing their garden.
Mhm.
Like they're not even trying to show you their kids; they're trying to show you like this new tree they got. I was
Yeah.
like, it was like the most fun I've had in a long time, man. It was so much fun, and it was great finally getting to meet you. It was so weird because we've known each other for a while now, and it's
Mhm.
whenever you meet we talk to someone online all the time and you've never met them in real life, it's so weird meeting someone at first. But like with you, and I'm gonna meet Phil in a month finally,
Yeah.
like it's gonna be so me and Phil have almost been doing the podcast for over a year
Oh,
almost.
wow.
It's flown by, and you've been doing yours for like 5 years now. And
Yeah.
like, dude, time flies,
It's
man.
crazy.
It's so crazy the way this works, man, and it's been so much fun. I want to ask. I got a couple questions in here, so
Okay.
y'all got any questions? Drop them down below. So this might be a good person to ask for the. My stuff keeps blipping. I go in and out. Blue Sage said, "Where would you suggest a layperson homeowner go to get water conversation uh, conservation
Conservation
advice?"
advice. So, I've got a couple of things. One, like we were talking earlier, check out your extension office in your area, and their resources. Usually, there's some really good stuff. Master gardener associations, local nurseries. A lot of times, like they're usually. It depends where you go and it depends where you are, but a lot of local nurseries will kind of know what works well in the area,
Yeah.
especially if they're growing out their own stuff. Um, Another place that you might check out, a group I've worked with a ton, is the local water conservation district. So we have
Yes.
the High Plains Water Conservation District here, and they're responsible for groundwater and sort of like all kinds of things. And they have great resources on how to save water, and a lot of them, especially in places with bigger cities, will have a lot of urban resources too. So,
I know some places you can get like free rain barrel
mhm.
collection, like they'll do like stuff like that, like a couple times a year. Like, hey, come pick up a free rain barrel.
Yeah, like I did some programs with 2 or 3 of the water conservation districts around here where like people would pay like I don't know, 20 or $30 and I do an hour-long talk. Usually there'd be another person and then they would go home with a rain barrel. And that's so cool. Like it's such a
Yeah,
good deal.
yeah, and rainwater is so much better for your garden
Oh
than
yeah. Yeah.
it's. I mean,
Catch
I've
rainwater. Absolutely.
oh for sure. I mean, and you might be the person to ask about that. Like what is it that makes rainwater better than regular like tap water?
So one, your tap water is going to have a lot of stuff dissolved in it. We have a lot of dissolved solids. Those could be salts. They could be just different minerals that it picks up as it passes through the ground, right? Because a lot of our water is coming from wells or surface water, but it's going to pick up stuff kind of regardless of how it gets where it's going. It's going to pick stuff up along the way. Uh, And that can be like solid materials, that can be chemicals, that can be all kinds of stuff. And then to get a lot of that stuff out, we have to process our water. And, we add different treatments to it. We add different things that are safe for us, but sometimes for our plants, they don't like some of these chemicals, especially if we're adding them, if that's all we're adding, right? Like I tell people a lot of times, your irrigation water that comes out of your hose is keeping your plants alive until it rains again. Like we are bridging the gap to the next rainstorm
Right.
uh, when we water. And because, like, a half an inch of rain, you could water for weeks and everything looks just kind of meh. And then it rains a half inch and you're off to the races. And so, like,
It's like
uh,
it's like water without electrolytes. Like you need electrolytes. You can drink as much water as you want, but you need electrolytes, for
yeah.
that as well.
Well, and so that's part of it too. So, like, rainwater tends to be like pH neutral or slightly acidic, usually. And if you get rainfall during a thunderstorm, lightning will actually split nitrogen in the atmosphere and dissolve nitrogen into rainwater. And so there's a little bit of nitrogen in it. So you notice that big green up after a rain. Uh,
Always.
some of that is because there's nitrogen in the water. It's part of the nitrogen cycle, right? There's enough energy in, so not too, nitrogen molecules are what we call triple bonded together. So they have they're really tightly bound, right? So it takes a lot of energy to break those triple bonds and then dissolve that nitrogen into something else,
Okay.
into a plant available form, like a nitrate or a nitrite or ammonia or different things. So when lightning strikes, there's enough energy to break that triple bond, and then the nitrogen gets dissolved into water drops and in different compounds, and then it falls with the rain, right? So it's not like a ton. You're not going to completely replace your fertilizer with, just waiting for it to rain, but it's not nothing, right?
Right.
And so uh, rain in a lot of ways is going to be better. Again, it's cleaner. It doesn't have all those dissolved solids in it. Usually, because of the way it falls, it makes it into the soil a little bit better.
It's
And
softer. It's soft water. I think consider like soft water.
yeah, and then it carries a little bit of nitrogen with it too. So there's a lot of benefits to rainwater.
Yeah, nothing's gonna replace those crystals and the copper wires that you
Yeah,
run through.
copper rods for sure, for sure. You got to
See
have
that,
that.
that's another one that I never feel bad about crapping
Oh
on,
no, yeah, no.
dude. After I sent y'all that link, I found that guy who's like the super hippie. He was making like, I mean, they were like Magellan staff, like wizard staff copper rods. And he was charging like $400 a piece or something like that for him with rubies and gems. And I was like, this dude is straight up ripping people off. Is the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what, again, that's one of the another big problem with some of this misinformation is like it's never, like, how do I say this? Like that misinformation is never free, right? Like a
Yeah.
lot of times they're like, "Oh, you can't do it this way. This is the way they want you to do it. But if you buy my super secret thing, you can, like, I don't know, stick it to the man and get." And it's just like, listen, like, no one's out in nature. Like nature's not out planting its own copper rods. It's like, I don't know, man. I think it's frustrating. I get frustrated about that stuff too.
Well, and it'll be a real bummer sometimes because that same guy that we're talking about, like with the copper rods, he doesn't believe in Wi-Fi, so he plugs his iPhone into an Ethernet cable, which is bizarre. Um, that guy I was telling you about, who was talking about the seed oils and the olive oils, like, oh yeah, some of this stuff makes sense, but he was using a lot of big words, so it kind of confused me. And I followed him and I scrolled down, and he starts talking about his phone and
Mm,
how he puts it in his pocket, but whenever he puts it in his pocket, he's got to put it in airplane mode and he's got to turn the signal off and everything because of the radiation in that area.
mm,
Is concerned about it. And I'm like, man, I think it's pretty negligible. I mean, I don't know, man. It kind of threw like the 5G. Like, I don't
yeah.
know.
I'm
It's
pretty
it,
sure just like the background radiation from space is doing more to, like, yeah.
yeah. Oh, and there's also they always have those little meters that will like ding off. It's like it's like the ones the Ghostbusters used to like to find like the or e-readers or whatever they're called. It's just like I don't know, man. Real quick, I want to finish talking about how you're Texas Tech. So you're the assistant dean now. You're the
Mhm.
assistant dean of outreach and what else? What
And
is it?
engagement. So, essentially, like, we're talking about how do we work with the community better. That's basically my job, is figuring out and working with our associate dean, who's sort of my boss, um, to, like, there's this big problem in academia where, okay, let me put it this way, like, what other industry could someone pay for a product and essentially, like, we use the money, we produce the product, and then be like, "Okay, this is ours now." Right? I don't think we do it on purpose, but, like, we use taxpayer money to do research, and then we take this research and we put it in a journal. We put it in something that you have to, like, pay to access, and we write it in language that's not accessible, and we do all this stuff, which is, part of where extension comes in to take that and, like, interpret it, but
Discern.
yeah, and put it
It's
in terms that, like, anyone can understand.
it's like back in the day when no one could read, and so it was up to like the priests to discuss the word of God because no one else
Yeah.
could read. That's kind of what it is a little
Kinda,
bit.
kinda, and but now we've kinda, like, started talking more about, like, we need to be more active in our communities. We need to be doing this. So, 2 parts of this outreach is sort of like my podcast and, like, going and giving a talk and, like, working with community organizations or school groups or things like that. And then engagement is like, okay, how do we work with these people to do more research, to teach better? So, for example, my one of my classes this semester, my vegetables class, is going to be an engaged teaching class. So one of the things we're going to do is my students, to learn about local vegetable production, we're going to go work with some local growers. We're going to go spend some time in community gardens. We're going to go spend some time at a farmer's market learning how that process works.
That's
And so my
cool.
my students will get to go and actually help the community run their market, do whatever. But then they get the experience of, yeah, I'm learning more than just from a book. Like, what does it take to actually do this business and be in this industry? And so, like,
Yeah.
those kinds of things where we partner with people out in the community is very much like our engagement mission. And so, my job is partially helping train our faculty to do that better. And not because it's a little scary, right? It's not
Yeah.
anything that we're ever trained to do. I've sort of taken it on myself over the years to figure it out, but like most of our faculty don't have any formal training in that. So we're trying to figure out how do we make it easy enough that they can do it in a meaningful way without adding 15 hours of work to their week. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
that's a big part of my job. And then doing programs, and we're developing hopefully a podcast video series in the college to tell more of the stories of what we do, from like fiber production to animal agriculture to ag education and landscape design and architecture and everything in between. And so I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's going to be cool.
That's really cool, man. No, it sounds like um it sounds like they know what you're capable of and they're giving you, a little bit I mean, because I'm assuming this is it extra or is it extra work for you or is it kind of
So
a new position altogether?
it's hard. So it's not necessarily extra. Kind of how it works is we'll have like appointments. Like, so I'm like 80% teaching and 20% other.
Okay.
And the other has been like managing the greenhouse and doing service kind of stuff, serving on committees, blah, blah, blah. But I was already doing a lot of this like outreach stuff anyway. Right.
Yeah.
And so now that 20% is this position. And
Wow.
so, yes, it's more work, but I think it's more work that, at least to me, feels really meaningful. Like, it's something that I want to do, and it's cool getting credit for doing it because I was kind of doing some of it anyway.
Yeah. Well, and they know they have like the social media backing with you as well, like because you're really good at the social media stuff. You're good at the podcasting stuff. Like you have a really good voice for podcasting. Like I
Well, thanks.
wish I don't have a broadcast voice. I've got a very distinctive voice. And apparently my dad was talking on the video, and people say me and my dad sound exactly alike,
Oh, that's interesting.
which kind of freaks me out. But I mean, so yeah, I mean, I have faith that you will take that to the next level and really
Well,
make it your own, man.
I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to it, and this is week 2, and so I'm headed to Waco actually tomorrow to
Nice.
speak at a conference down there, and we'll be in Portland sometime in October, and going and learning as much as I can, and then hopefully this semester and especially in the spring kind of hit the ground running.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic, dude. No, I love hearing because we used to do this at work whenever we'd get new engineers at work. Before they'd work in the office doing engineer work, they spend 6 months in the field with us, like
Hmm.
2 or 3 months on the testing side, and this is electrical work, so like
Hmm.
2 or 3 months on the construction side, and they get to see up close and personal what those little drawings are on all the blueprints and all the one lines that they do, and so to hear that some of the students that, some of them might have some agricultural backgrounds and some experience are going to get get their hands dirty and help,
Hmm.
and learn a little bit more. And it'll really help them out because, I didn't know like what going out of high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew
Hmm.
up. I didn't know what I wanted to be like if I went to college or whatever. So if they already have the mindset that they want to go into like some kind of agriculture, they're going to get to see up close and personal what kinds of opportunities they can have,
Yeah.
and like maybe make some good connections for the future as well.
That's the hope, and I'm bringing in some guest speakers from industry. I think. Do you know John the farmer?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I think he's got like one of the biggest, I think, winter greens production systems in the United States. Like
In
he's
New Mexico, yeah.
Arizona. He's down near
Oh,
Yuma.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Same thing.
yeah, pretty much. But yeah, no, I mean, you drive through there and it's like, oh my god, we're gonna have to rescue Matt Damon from here sometime.
Yeah, yeah.
But like, I think he's gonna talk to them at some point this semester about some of his
Oh,
production
cool.
stuff, and I've got a couple other people. There's a woman locally that runs a nonprofit that uh, connects community gardens and local producers with people that need food, and so consumers, like people that purchase food, like people shopping for food, but also like community help and things like that. And so she's going to come talk, and our food bank has a farm program. We're probably going to go tour that and some other stuff. And so
That's really cool,
a lot
man.
of cool stuff to see and do.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what you do with all this, and hopefully through the social media, like and for everybody who doesn't already follow you, you're the plant prof on everything.
Hmm.
And then is there going to be a separate Instagram for like the Texas Tech stuff, like for the
Probably not. I think so. We already have like, I don't run it, but we already have the TTU Davis College, uh,
yeah.
which is our college, and then there's a plant and soil science one. But I don't know what that podcast is going to look like, but it'll probably live in the Davis College page. So
Okay. Nice. Nice, man. Well, I'm really excited to see, what you do in the future with all this stuff, and I'm sure we'll get some more updates from you like on the garden
oh,
party
for
and stuff
sure.
like that. If we can ever get you back,
Yeah, we'll have to sort that out.
I moved the garden party specifically to Wednesday because I know you joined a art,
Yeah, I'm taking an art
something.
class. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like fun. I saw your hands were all covered in paint the other day.
Oh
I thought
yeah.
that was hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been on for about an hour or so, and I'm gonna let you go, man. But real quick, let everybody know where they can find you. If you got any events coming up, and what's going on.
Yeah, so again, I'm the plant prof all over the place. Facebook, sort of. I don't do a lot on Facebook, but more Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and now Threads. I'm actually pretty active on Threads.
Saw that.
Uh,
Yeah.
you can find my podcast. It's Planthropology, so anthropology with a PL. I wrote a book called Plants to the Rescue, and it's a nonfiction kids book about how plants can help us fight a lot of the things going on in our world. And
I didn't bring this and have you sign it. I should
oh,
have brought it. I should have brought it and had you sign it.
can't
Dang
believe
it!
we
I
didn't think of
forgot. I
that.
didn't even think about it, man.
Oh, we'll have to get that done sometime too.
No, that's funny. I didn't even think about that. That's hilarious.
But yeah, I'm not that hard to find all over the internet. I'm out there.
No, for sure, man. And we always love having you on the podcast and stuff. Right here in Houston, we're dealing. I don't know. I haven't checked the trajectory of the storm. It looks like we're going to catch a little bit of that tropical
Oh yeah.
storm or whatever. What's kind of crazy is we're doing the garden party Wednesday night with Michael Fiore from Smith's Garden Town,
Uh-huh.
and then Thursday morning I'm heading to Alabama. I'm driving to Alabama,
Oh wow.
so I'll be driving through the aftermath of whatever
Oh
this
wow.
storm does. So that's gonna be crazy. You
Camera
went out,
decided to blur.
you went out of focus.
There it is. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll see the aftermath, but I'll be vlogging the whole trip.
Cool.
Gonna meet some cool YouTubers, but I will be there, hell or high water, at the Great Fall Garden Festival at Petals from the Past on Saturday. So
Super cool.
no, I'm really excited. But yeah, make sure you follow Vikram everywhere, Plant Prof, and we'll see you Wednesday on the garden party with Michael Fiore. Appreciate you coming on, Vikram. Great to learn a little bit more about you and find out what I didn't know.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's always a better podcast when I don't have to talk that much. And this is by far the most intelligent podcast I've had ever, maybe. So I appreciate you coming on, man.
Absolutely.
Thanks, buddy.